Hey everyone, welcome to my video, and today I'm going to share something with you that cannot be found anywhere else on the internet. I'm going to show you how to make a mojito. The reason you won't find anything else like this on the internet is because I'm going to take around 15 minutes to explain it to you. Now, unlike every recipe on the internet, I will not be going into the vast history of this drink, nor will I be writing a personal blog about how I reminisce about picking fresh mint in the garden in my childhood. Instead, what I'm going to be doing is explaining every single brain processing cognitive function that it would require in order for you to actually make this drink. Before I begin this video, I'd like to state a disclaimer to drink responsibly and to science responsibly, meaning don't be consuming alcohol if you're not at the legal age limit, do know your limits, and don't take any facts at face value from a YouTube video. Check my sources. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to need to do is grab our ingredients. You'll need a glass, mint, sugar, limes, ice, rum, and soda water. But it just so happens that creating this list, figuring out what you had already and had to go buy, seeing if and when you would need to improvise, all rely on something we refer to as executive functioning. There are many working definitions of executive functioning, but basically think of it as the management system of the brain. Executive functions derive from the frontal lobe, primarily within the prefrontal cortex. A specific region of this cortex that plays a big role is called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This cortex is located in Brodmann's areas 9 and 10 and is located on the left and right lateral surface of the anterior frontal lobe. Here are a few great examples of executive functioning. Inhibition involves resisting dominant responses to focus on the task at hand, which is crazy to think that the brain is selectively attending to internal and environmental stimuli every single day. Because maybe my dominant response right now is to go pet the very cute dog in the background, despite the fact I know I'm supposed to be filming a video. I hate inhibition. But it's necessary. If someone has poor inhibitory control, then they might be hyperactive, easily distracted, and display poor impulse control. Working memory, which is holding and operating verbal and nonverbal information in mind. This process is super important for learning and focusing, as well as being able to follow steps and instructions. Heck, you're using working memory right now to follow my instructions. Can you imagine if I maybe gathered all of these ingredients and then somehow forgot what I was using them for, and now for some reason I'm trying to make a pie out of limes and club soda? Cognitive flexibility, shifting between multiple tasks and adjusting behavior based on a changing circumstance. This skill is particularly important when it comes to learning from our mistakes, as well when it comes to multitasking. Because maybe I actually was making a pie while I was filming a video about making mojitos, and I had to remember what time to take it out of the oven so that it wouldn't burn. In fact, research has shown that individuals who suffer lesions in their frontal lobe actually have trouble conducting a lot of these executive functions that we talked about. This can have a ton of negative effects on daily academic performance as well as job performance too. One other task that fails without any sort of executive functioning is one we do in this very kitchen, cooking, or in our case, making a cocktail. It takes multitasking, working with current information. And listen, we've known this all the way back since the 1930s. Since a neurosurgeon named Wilder Penfield performed a right frontal lobe resection on his sister. A year later, she was unable to make even a small dinner. She bought all the food, one or two things were even out on the stove, but she wasn't able to make a salad. She was clearly confused and distressed. Nothing was really cooked, and she was just cooking a small supper for one guest and her 4 family members. So this goes to prove that executive functioning doesn't just have a role in our professional lives, but our personal lives too. So to start, we're going to take one lime, we're going to cut off the end just like this, cut an inch slice, and then we're going to cut it off into 4 pieces. By the way, neuroimaging studies have actually shown that numerosity, and counting correlates with increased activity in the occipito-parietal region. Research has shown that individuals with lesions in this occipito-parietal area do have trouble counting. What's funny though is that people with these lesions still have the ability to do arithmetic, but not counting, which is so counterintuitive, but I think that's super interesting. It's almost like it doesn't add up. But good thing those lesions don't really happen for me, otherwise who knows how many pieces of lime we would end up in this drink. Next, we're gonna take around 7 to 10 mint leaves. And as we're picking them, we're gonna notice how fresh they smell and how wonderful that is. But before we toss them into the drink, we're gonna give them a nice little slap. This helps extract the oils from the mint and creates a lovely minty aroma. You see, the odors in this aroma bind to receptors of olfactory sensory neurons, which then project to the olfactory bulb, and from there connects to a range of areas in the medial temporal and basal frontal lobe, which we often refer to as the primary olfactory cortex. This cortex also has connections to our limbic system and its structures, such as the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. Smell also happens to be the only sense that bypasses the thalamus, which is our brain's relay information center. It's this system that helps connect odors to memories and our emotions. Because mint is one of the main ingredients of a mojito, I'm kind of hoping that you think it's a pleasant scent. And if you do, that's great news for you because research suggests that pleasant smells have been demonstrated to improve mood, decrease anxiety, and make people feel more alert and attentive. Which is great because for the next few steps, I'm really gonna require your attention and I want you to be in a good mood. Next, we're gonna add some sugar to the glass. Now as a sweetener, some people like to use other things, simple syrup, honey, agave syrup, but our executive functioning skills said let's not overcomplicate things and stick to basic sugar. Now I don't like my drinks too sweet, so I'm gonna stick to about 1 teaspoon of sugar. Plus, it's always easier to add more later if needed. Despite being only about 2% of a person's body weight, the brain uses up to 20% of the body's glucose, so it does need sugar. However, hopefully that's coming from a balanced diet rather than strictly cocktails. With these 3 ingredients in the glass, we are going to muddle them, which will start mixing and releasing all of the flavors. Now, if you don't have a muddler, that's okay. Just grab a rolling pin, or really anything with a flat surface will do. And when you're muddling, you want to make sure that you're not over muddling the drink, okay? Doing so can also release more of the bitterness in the limes and the mint. Additionally, you don't want to crush the mint. Little pieces separate, float around, and get caught in your teeth. Not very nice. We want this drink to be in perfect mint condition. Now all of these steps, the cutting of the lime, the muddling of the mint, the picking of the mint, they all require excellent fine motor control. There are several brain structures involved when it comes to motor tasks such as the prefrontal cortex, the basal ganglia, and the cerebellum. As humans, we have lots of complex behaviors, and sometimes localizing these behaviors to specific brain regions can be difficult, but we do have a general idea. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex is activated while selecting the appropriate motor movement for a given scenario. In this case, picking up a knife to chop a lime or using the muddler to muddle the mint. The activation in this region gets even stronger when these tasks require concentration, attention, and planning. Our cerebellum, however, is more associated with the integration of visual information and our motor movements. This means our cerebellum is required to appropriately guide movements while they are happening, as well as create an internal representation of the objects that are being manipulated. You can think of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex as determining which motor action to perform, and the cerebellum as coordinating those actions. Let's not forget about the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia mainly consists of the striatum, the globus pallidus, the substantia nigra, and the subthalamic nucleus. Altogether, the basal ganglia has a massive role in the mediation of cognitive and motor components to generate an appropriate decision on a resulting action for a particular task. This structure is also strongly associated with memory-guided movement, or movements that are more automated. So maybe this is the first time that you've ever made a mojito, but you chop and muddle stuff all the time. These motor actions would then likely produce strong activations in the basal ganglia. The dysfunction of the basal ganglia can lead to disorders such as Parkinson's disease, in which individuals show motor and cognitive dysfunction with specific impairments in the internal generation of motor actions. Now we are going to go ahead and add 50 milliliters of rum. Traditionally, this drink calls for a white rum, which also keeps the color quite clear, but go ahead and use whatever kind you like. If you choose to make your mojito without alcohol too, that's okay. I know you already heard the disclaimer at the start of this video, but I feel like we can't have a brain interactive cocktail video without at least briefly mentioning the effects of alcohol on the brain. Alcohol intoxication does result in a variety of neurochemical changes that affect cognition, mood, and behavior. A couple examples of these behavioral changes include a weakening in attention, a weakening in rehearsal, and a weakening in response inhibition. When compared with sober individuals, studies have found that alcohol-impaired individuals have decreased neuronal activation in cognitive regions necessary for goal-directed motor actions, specifically in tasks that required active processing of visual feedback and reduced activity in the frontoparietal network. Now, besides the motor mechanisms we've talked about already, did you know that there are extensive studies on the frontal lobe regions activated when we grasp objects in particular ways? It turns out that the way we grab objects is unique based on the purpose of the grasp. For example, I'm going to grab this bottle of rum differently when I'm pouring it into a glass versus if I was lifting it up to put it into a bucket of ice. Furthermore, research has shown increased activation in the bilateral superior parietal lobes and the right inferior parietal lobes when we are planning actions with unfamiliar objects opposed to familiar objects. This suggests that determining how to grip an object takes more effort when planning actions if the object is unfamiliar. Fortunately, with some bartending experience, pouring bottles is a very familiar action to me. Lastly, we're going to go ahead and add some ice to our drink. And as soon as we fill that up, we're going to top it with some club soda. After everything is mixed in together, use a spoon to gently stir and mix everything in, making sure not to be too aggressive with it. We'll also make sure to cut a little bit of a lime wedge, add some nice garnish to it with a sprig of mint, never forgetting to slap. And there you go, your finished mojito. And don't laugh at me for wanting it to look pretty, because the identification and selection of food or beverages is usually based on their appearance, because visual stimuli can prompt people to recall their past food intake experiences. For example, there has actually been research that has demonstrated that there's a significant difference of brainwave patterns when people consume coffee with latte art versus no latte art at all, which gives a totally new perspective on the concept of tasting with your eyes. Now take a sip. Is it too sour? Is it too strong? Is it too sweet? So it's pretty well known that we have taste buds, and in these taste buds we have unique taste receptors. By the way, these taste receptor cells are renewed about every 7 to 10 days. Well, when sweet taste receptors are activated, cranial nerves send gustatory information to the rostral divisions of the nucleus tractus solidaris of the medulla. A mouthful, I know. In humans, this information proceeds to the ventral-posterior medial nucleus of the thalamus, eventually ending up in the primary gustatory cortex, and this is where we perceive it as sweet. It should also be noted that this pathway also crosses the amygdala and the lateral hypothalamic areas, which ties our concept of taste to emotion, as well as the regulation of sugar within our bodies. Thank you again for watching the video. I hope you learned something new. If you really enjoyed this video and you want to see something like it again, well, too bad. This was a lot of work, and I don't really care to do it again. Otherwise, have a great day.